Welcome to another episode of the Recovery Scene. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like. Tonight I have Aimee Smith on. Aimee's story is an interesting one because her addiction actually started at a young age. I would say a very young age, but at a young age. You started getting migraines, and it was actually Dad who was supplying the pain medicine, but I'm going to leave that there because I'm going to let you explain exactly what I mean by that. So, Aimee, thanks for being here and take it away.
Thank you for having me.
All about it.
Okay, I was born in a small town in Northern California, and I was the youngest of 4 children. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was an emergency room physician. He was the head of the emergency room in our little town. My siblings were all quite a bit older than me. My closest sibling was 9 years older than me, and my furthest one was 20 years older than me. So my parents had them really spread out. So I was the baby of the family, and kind of my dad's favored. I hate to say that, but parents aren't supposed to have favorites, but I was. And so had a really good childhood, picture perfect childhood. No, not a lot of trauma. My parents did have a split when I was about 3 that was a little bit traumatic, but they ended up working it out and getting back together. And I grew up in a really nice 2-story home, picture perfect, had a pony, all the things that doctor's daughter
pony. Every little girl wants a pony.
Had a swimming pool. Had a swimming pool with a slide and a diving board. I mean, I had a very good child. I was a spoiled, rotten little girl. I really was. I can admit that. Really good things, great childhood. And then around the age of 17, I had a really boyfriend that I fell in love with, or at least I thought, and started becoming sexually active with. And so my parents talked to me about birth control, and my dad put me on the Depo-Provera shot for birth control. And I started getting really bad migraines. They were hormonally related. I'd never had a migraine before in my life. And I started getting these terrible migraines. And so I was like, what is this? Never had a migraine before, had headaches, but nothing like a migraine. And so the first few, we treated them with ibuprofen and Tylenol, wasn't cutting it. And then started treating me with like Fioricet, I think was the first drug that I had that was anything that was like, a pain medication. And it worked a little bit, but not too well. And then I think one day I had an extremely bad one where it was sensitivity to light and, was vomiting and the whole 9 yards, and the pain was just, unbearable. And so he came home from work and he brought me a shot, an injection. And it was, at the time, I didn't know anything about medication that much. And it was Demerol and Phenergan. Demerol for the pain and then Phenergan for the nausea.
Wow, and that's heavy duty.
Yes, it was. And so he gave me a shot of the medication. And my dad was an older man. My parents had me late in life. My mom was 38 and my dad was 42, I believe, when they had me. So, and I was 17 at this point. So my dad was in his 50s, late 50s. So he had gone to medical school around the time when pain medication, that was what you did for pain. You gave pain medication. So that was his training. And so he gave me it. And of course, it felt amazing. I was like, the feeling up into my body, it was like, oh, wow, this is really something else. And the pain went away immediately. It was like, and I fell asleep and I slept for like 10 hours straight. And I woke up the next day and I was like, this is great. The pain's gone. The migraine's gone. I slept great. I felt wonderful. And I thought, okay, this is great.
And before, I just want to interject real quick. Before people are like, oh, I can't believe your dad gave that to you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
They have to remember that pharmaceutical companies now, as we speak, are being sued because some doctors, later doctors were bribed basically to give their patients these medications. But at first, these pharmaceutical companies, and we'll say allegedly, because some of them are still in the process of being
Yeah.
sued,
Mhm.
lied about the
Yes.
side effects or minimized
Yes.
the side effects, lied about the capacity for addiction, lied
Yes.
about withdrawal. So
Mhm.
some doctors, and we are going to assume the best of your dad.
Yeah,
So
he was.
yeah,
Mhm.
he
I
wasn't
really think he thought,
giving you to this knowingly to
yes,
hurt you.
I think if he would have known where this was going to lead, my father would have never intended. I mean, my dad was a wonderful man. He was an excellent physician. I think he thought he didn't want to see his daughter in pain, and that was his training. And I think he thought, I was legitimately in pain, and I think he thought that was the answer.
Exactly.
And I mean, I think looking back now, he's gone now, but I think looking back, he would have never had done that. But at the
Agreed.
time, he thought it was the right way to go.
Right.
So, now looking back at it, people would think, oh, it's terrible. But, it is what it is
We know
now.
better now. We know better.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
didn't say.
I'm 45. So this was over 25 years ago.
Right.
So a long time ago. It's been a long time. Things have changed a lot. So that happened and time went on. And within a month, I had another migraine. And so the same thing went on. He came home with another shot and gave me another shot. And in the meantime, when I would have ones that weren't as bad, he would prescribe me maybe like 30 Vicodin. If they weren't as bad, he would tell me to take the Vicodin instead. And he would only give me the shot if it got to the point that the Vicodin didn't work.
Right.
And so at that point, it wasn't an addiction. I really was just taking it when I had pain. It wasn't like I was popping pills or anything like that. I was just taking it when I had pain, and he was only giving me the shots if the pain level was to the point that I was breaking through the Vicodin, and I could not control it with that. And so that went on for quite a few years, that pattern. And I never really thought about it as being a problem, because it really wasn't at that point. I never thought about it being, anything other than controlling pain when I had a migraine. And that was that. So my 20s rolled around and I started dating a boy, or a man, I should say. We'll call him a man. And I started dating him. He had been a boyfriend of one of my best friends, and they had broken up, and then we started dating, and we didn't have a lot in common, but my parents really liked him. And I had a need to please my parents. I really wanted to be like my mom. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I saw my mom as like this picture perfect, Martha Stewart kind of stay-at-home picture mother who baked cookies and made dinner every night on the table and raised her kids. And I just saw her as like this wonderful mother. And I wanted so much to be that person. And I thought that that's what my parents wanted for me. And so I really, really wanted to do that. I thought that was the expectation of me. And so I started dating him, and I really wanted to get married. That was kind of like my goal, to get married. And it's funny, it's making me a little choked up thinking about it. But and I was 20, let's see, I was 23 when I got married. So I was 21 when we started dating. And I had boyfriends before and stuff, but and I had one before that I'd almost married, but it hadn't worked out. And so within 6 months of dating, he proposed to me. And yeah. And we got engaged. And actually, he proposed to me in front of both of our families. And we hadn't even talked about marriage, and we should have. And I kind of felt pressured to say yes, because both families were sitting there at the table, and I said yes. And even then in my mind, I kind of remember thinking, I don't know about this one, but I said yes. And we had a long engagement. And I'll remember the night before the wedding, my dad paid for this huge elaborate wedding where the whole town, I mean, all these people were invited. I had the big white perfect dress and everything else, and on this beautiful place. And the night before the wedding, he did some things at his bachelor party, which I wasn't too happy about, including falling into a planter and cutting his whole eye open. And my dad tried to stitch him up, and it was too late. And it was a total nightmare. All the pictures, he had a gash in his head this big.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And I remember the night before the wedding, I was crying and I'm saying, I don't want to marry him. to my parents. And my mom said, but you have to, we put all this money out for this wedding. And my dad's saying, if you really don't want to marry him, Aimee, you don't have to. And I said, no, I'll do it. I'll do it. And so the next day I got married, and I regretted it instantly. And so we got married, and within a month of getting married, I found myself pregnant. And I was 23, and I was clueless about pretty much everything. And actually the month before that, my brother, my oldest brother, had been in an accident and become a quadriplegic. The month before I got married. And I was working as a hairdresser at the time, and I had quit my job to take care of him. And so I was taking care of him, and I found out I was pregnant, and my husband was not happy about the pregnancy. He wanted me to have an abortion. He told me he didn't want children. And
he had never brought this up before.
Never. And I was this, I want to be this housewife and this mother, and that's exactly what I wanted.
Right.
I had this whole other idea of what this marriage was going to be like. So I was devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not what I want, and he was hammering me, you need to get an abortion. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And so it was terrible. And he made my whole pregnancy miserable. And then when he found out it was a girl at the ultrasound, he stormed out of the ultrasound because he was upset it was a girl. And, he wanted a boy to carry on the name and all this, if he was going to have a child. And it was a terrible, miserable 9 months. And he was never home. He hunted or worked all the time. And I didn't know how to be a wife. I didn't even know how to take care of a house because my mother had done everything for me my whole entire life. Right. And so then I found we bought this little teeny home, and I didn't know how to do laundry. I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know how to do anything for myself, really. I mean, I really was inept at most things, and I just was overwhelmed. And so then I had to stop taking care of my brother because I had a lot of problems with the pregnancy, and I couldn't lift him, all these other things, and he couldn't lift himself. He was in a wheelchair. And so I was home by myself. I was lonely, and I found myself getting more and more depressed and more miserable in this marriage. So then I had this baby, and sorry.
Okay. That's all right. It's a lot of memories we're bringing back up.
Yeah. And she was amazing. I was so in love with her. And brought her home, and I started getting really, really bad postpartum depression. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what's going on because I was so happy to have this baby, but then I was so sad at the same time.
Right.
And I started
that also was not, we weren't as woke about mental health issues and things like that.
And,
they call it the baby blues.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I was crying all the time, but I was happy to have this baby. And she had really bad colic, so she would scream for hours and hours on end. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? And, I was just, and he wasn't helping. And then I started getting really bad postpartum anxiety too. I mean, to go as far as things that didn't even make sense. Like I had weird ideas of like, people were going to shoot through the windows to try to kill the baby, that I had to put my body between the window and her. I mean, things that didn't even make sense.
That is part of postpartum depression. That's the kind I had. I constantly thought something was going to happen. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't ever have any things about hurting the baby. I know some women have that. Mm-hmm. Personally, I didn't. I had things that people were going to hurt her. That was more my thing.
Yep. And
so, it was really scary. And I didn't really feel like I could talk to anybody about it because, you're supposed to be happy. You have this baby, and you have these weird ideas. And then eventually I broke down so bad I called my dad, and I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just sad all the time, and I'm scared of all these things. And so he said, well, we'll get you some help. And my mother was the opposite. She was like, you just got to get through it. And you just got to my mother's always been that kind of mother. She was like, you just do it. You don't cry about it. You just get through it, and you just toughen up. You toughen up. And I was like, well, I can't. I'm trying, but I can't. And so I got to a counselor, which turned out she wasn't a very good counselor. And then when I'd had the baby, I was prescribed Vicodin because I had a C-section. She was breech. So I took the Vicodin for the C-section and I ran out pretty fast. And I called my dad up and I said, I'm still having pain. I need more Vicodin. And he prescribed me another prescription and took that pretty fast too.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself, these are making me feel a little better emotionally, not just physically, but emotionally. And I remember that I don't think I knew at that time that I was taking them for the emotional part. I think I was convincing myself that I was having pain, but I really probably wasn't. And
right. Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
just started taking them. I just started taking them on a daily basis. Like it was like, okay, it's a little bit easier to get out of bed with these. It's a little bit easier to take care of the baby with these. It's a little bit easier to deal with my shitty husband with these. You know, this is just making life a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. And then slowly but surely over time, there came the addiction. And I was just finding ways to get pain pills any way I could. You know, I wasn't buying them yet, but I was getting prescriptions from my dad, or I was getting them from friends. I would go over to people's houses and say, oh, I got a headache or this or that or something else. And I would find ways to get some. And so I was taking them a lot. And then it was getting to the point where they were giving me energy instead of making me sleepy. You know, and then I was like, oh, I need these in order to be a good mom, or I need these to clean the house, or these are making me a good I convinced myself that they were helping me.
Right.
You know,
right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's really when the addiction started. I mean, that's when the pain pills went from taking them for pain to taking them to function, you know, and it just took off from there. And so a couple of years down the line, I found myself pregnant with my second child, and we had a little boy this time. So he was happy about that. The marriage was a complete disaster. I mean, he was never home. I think when I brought my second son home, he wasn't even home when I brought him home, and I had a C-section. I think he went to a bachelor party of his friends that night, didn't come home for 3 days with a new baby. I mean, it was bad. And so here I was with 2 babies. I'd gotten a little better at cleaning house and cooking and those types of things, but still I was 26 at that point, 2 babies, and, you know, a pill addiction, basically, that no one really knew about. At that point, I was pretty good at keeping it to myself. I don't think I even realized that I had one at that point. I don't think I'd admit it to myself that it was an addiction. I was still telling myself that I needed these and that I was better with these.
Right. Nobody wants to admit that they're an addict or they have a problem.
Yeah. At that point, I didn't. Later on, that came, but at that point, I still didn't. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the marriage went on. I kept taking pills. I kept finding ways to get them. Went on for many years, and then eventually, he pressured me to go to work because he wasn't paying for anything. He wasn't paying for the children's clothing. My parents were giving me money to pay for the kids' diapers and clothing and food. He wasn't even buying food for the kids or myself.
Now, what were your parents?
So I decided.
What were your parents saying about all this at the time?
My parents were angry at him, but my family is a family that doesn't like to talk about things. They like to practice denial. And so my parents would be pissed off, but then they wouldn't say anything to him. And so they would be mad and they say, you know, my dad would be like, God damn it, Aimee, what's wrong with him? You know, but then they wouldn't say anything to him. And we eventually ended up selling that house and moving up closer to my parents lived in the mountains, which I thought would be better. But then we bought this crappy mobile home that he wouldn't fix up. And we were up in the snow. And then he ended up taking off even more. And it had like no heat, and it ended up being a total nightmare. And my parents just kept kind of enabling him to do what he was doing, and then enabling me I know they were helping me. So I'm not trying to come down on my parents because.
No, they didn't know. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's hard.
They were trying to help.
Yes.
But by helping, they were enabling both of you.
There you go. Yes. And, you know, they just kept giving me an allowance to live on with these kids because they wanted me to stay home with the kids, which was also in turn, it was reiterating in my mind that it was so important for me to stay home with my children that, you know, God forbid I go get a job, or God forbid I go work, or God forbid that was also really not helping. It was a mess. It was a mess.
Right. Because you didn't feel like you had a life or friends you could reach out to, or, you know, because I was completely isolated. And then when we moved into the mountains, I was even more isolated.
I didn't get a driver's license until I was like 27. My mom was driving me to the grocery store and stuff with these two kids. And I mean, it was a mess. And I was alone all the time with these kids. And I was just, you know, in this house, and I didn't talk to a lot of people, and taking these pills and just kind of doing my thing. And that was it.
Text or FaceTime or
this was before any of that. Yeah. This was before there was anything like that. So no, I wasn't connected with anybody at all. So it was really lonely. It was extremely lonely. And so we moved up there, and then eventually he bugged me so much, I decided that I needed to go to work because this just wasn't working. And also in the back of my mind, I think I knew that I had to get out of this marriage. One way or the other, I wasn't going to last much longer. And so, and I had to do something to support myself financially. So I went to like a trade type thing, and I got my CNA because I was interested in doing something in medicine. Everyone in my family ends up going something in medicine. And I didn't think I wasn't brave enough to go back to school, like to college, and do like real nurse. Not that CNA isn't real nursing. It's the hardest job there is. I'm not knocking CNAs because they do the hardest work that there possibly is. But, you know, in my family, it was not considered much because it wasn't an RN or a doctor or any of those types of things. My sister is an RN. My brother's a doctor. So, you know, so I went and I got my CNA, and I went back to work, and I went to work for the first time, really, except for the hairdressing that I'd done early on in life. Right. And I worked for a while, and then he went away on a hunting trip, and the house was kind of messy. When he left, he was mad at me about the house being messy. And the reason this story is important because it has to do with the first time I tried methamphetamine. And so I had this friend, and I said, would you come up and help me clean the house? And she goes, well, I have this stuff that'll help you clean the house. And I was doing pills at this point. And I said, what is it? And she said, it's meth. And I said, oh, no, I don't want to do that. And she goes, oh, you'll clean the house. You'll get the house clean. So she came up to my house, and she was doing meth. And I was like, no. And then just try it. So I did a line of meth for the first time, and I cleaned the hell out of my house. And we did like a 3-day meth binge. And literally for like 3 days straight, did line after line after line after line of meth. And cleaned my whole entire house and did not sleep. And then I had to go to work on the 4th day at the come down of meth.
Oh, that's rough. That could not have been a good time at all.
As a CNA. And I got to work. I'll never forget this. I got to work, and I was like trying to take care of patients, and I was just a wreck. Of course, I'm coming down, and I'm just like, like crying in the bathroom, and everyone's like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I had no idea because I'd never done like stimulants or anything before in my entire life. But I went like hardcore, like 3 days straight. And I remember I had some left over in my car, and I drove to a grocery store to get stuff for dinner on the way home, and I threw it in the garbage. I was like, never again. I don't want to touch that stuff. I was still doing pills, but I was like, never that stuff. No. That's not my thing. And so I didn't do meth again for a long, long time, but I did do it again eventually. So came home. He was so happy that the house was clean. He didn't even know what was going on. And eventually I left that job, and one thing led to another. I went to another job. I started working nights and I did really well at that job. And they had a position for a med tech. And I got the promotion and I became a med tech at a long-term, basically care society for the elderly. And so I was in charge of their pharmacy, like their med room.
Mm.
And
Good.
on nights.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
great job for a drug addict.
Yeah.
And still my family at this point doesn't know I'm a drug addict. My husband, I think, has started to suspect something, but still had not confirmed it at this point. And I got this job and I excelled at my job. Like I, at that point, was still holding my life together. And I was stealing their meds. I was the one who was destructing meds. So I was putting them in my bag. And I was in charge of all the people who were working that night. I was stealing fentanyl patches and I was wearing them.
Wow.
It gave me access. Yeah, I was like
Yeah.
literally saying I was destructing them and then I was putting them on me and wearing them home.
It's like a jackpot
It was
for an addict.
Oh, it
No,
was
you hit the
for
big
me
time.
at the time. It was the perfect thing. I was like, now I don't have to worry about getting prescriptions. I don't have to worry about. I did that job for like 2 years, and
And they didn't count the way they do now.
It was a different
automated,
world.
You know, yeah,
Yes.
totally different world.
Everything was done by count. It was a totally different world, and I managed to get away for it for a long time. And while I was at that job, I met a female who worked there, and we started having an affair. I was still married at the time, and we started having an affair, and and that went on for a while. And then my husband and I decided to separate, and we were going to get a divorce. He did not know about the female. And then we were going to try to hold out until the school year was over for the kids, because we were just going to live in the same house and then wait. But we knew the marriage was over. But then one day he decided, he was a mechanic, a body man, and he decided to take my car to fix it. And so I was at home sleeping because I worked nights. I get this angry call and he says, "Get the hell fuck out of the house." I said, "What happened?" He had pulled the seat out of the driver's car to work on it, and under the seat was this girl's boxers, a book that said "Married to the Man in Love with a Woman," and a bunch of syringes, a bunch of med cards that had different drugs on them, a bunch of everything, all the evidence from all my drug use, the affair, everything.
Yikes.
So I panic and I try to make excuse after excuse after excuse that it's not this and it's not what you think and it's not this and it's not that. And he says, "Get your shit and get out of my house." It was my house too, but I panicked. I grabbed my kids, I packed a suitcase, and I left the house. And I took the kids, and he said, "Don't you dare take the kids." And I said, "No, I'm taking my kids." My kids were like 8 and 6 at the time.
Right. You know, the
And
kids
so-
he didn't even want at first.
Yeah.
Now suddenly he's daddy.
So I took, oh yeah, and that's what ended up happening. And so I took my kids and they went and stayed with my sister for the weekend because I had nowhere to go. I literally had nowhere to go. And I stayed with my sister-in-law. And it was the worst divorce. He wanted the kids then he wanted the kids. I got a little apartment, a little 2-bedroom that I could afford. I still had my job. And then he wanted the kids. He wanted the kids bad. And I said, "Please don't take the kids." He didn't even know the kids, you know.
Right.
He'd never taken care of them. He didn't know anything about him. He didn't know the kids. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to take them." And I said, "What are you going to do with them when you work?" He said, "I don't care. I'll put them in daycare. I don't care." And sure enough, he got 50% custody of the kids. So we divorced, and the kids went back and forth, week on, week off. And he ended up getting a job he sold ice cream at fairs. He bought an ice cream truck and he went from fair to fair. So he ended up leaving them with me a lot more than my 50% timeshare because he was gone a lot, which was fine with me because I wanted my kids.
Right.
And they wanted
it
to be.
sounds like, you know, and it's not that he didn't have grounds, you know.
No, he did. He did.
But
he did.
It doesn't sound like, not knowing the man, that it was for he wanted them to hurt you, not because he wanted what was best for them, is what it sounds like.
That's exactly it. And it's not that I was the mother of the year at this point, because I mean, my kids weren't being neglected or anything, but obviously I had a drug problem, and you know, they were not in the best of hands because I had a drug problem.
Right.
But he did not want them for the right reason.
Yeah, we're not excusing that at all. You know,
no.
We're just saying,
no, not at all.
Sounds like he had ulterior motive.
He did. And he wanted to hurt me because the big thing, you know, my ex-husband was a very man's man. And when he found out I was having an affair with a woman, that was an ego crusher. I mean, he was, and all his friends made fun of him. I mean, he was devastated. And he just wanted to hurt me. He still, to this day, and this has been many years, can't stand that fact. So it really was a blow to the ego. And so this woman and I ended up breaking up, and I ended up meeting another woman, and I moved in with her right away.
Right. And she was the solution to all your problems.
Yes, she was. Yes, you know how that goes. I met her at a bar. And I moved in with her within a week of knowing her because my decision making was so great. And, and I moved my kids in with her, and we got married within a month of knowing each other. And then we decided to have a baby. And so, yes, I know. I look back on these decisions now and I think, oh, Aimee. And so we got a donor, and we had a man offered to be a donor, and we did insemination at home, and I got pregnant on the second time. And I got pregnant and I had a baby boy. And so we had a little boy, and that marriage was, of course, did not last. I mean, it was doomed from the beginning.
Right.
She was an alcoholic. Shocking. Shockingly enough, that marriage was doomed from the beginning. She was an alcoholic. I was a drug addict. She had chronic pain. So she had lots of pain pills. So of course that was great for me. She wanted me to quit my job right away. So I did. Sorry about that. Close. Low battery. I had to charge my phone. She wanted me to move in. She wanted me to quit my job, stay in with the kids, which of course was my goal. So, I was like, yay, another person to take care of me, you know, because that's what I was always looking for back then, you know, somebody to take care of me. So I did that, and put myself back in a position of being taking care of somebody, and back in the position of being dependent on somebody, and with another baby and the other kids, and then put myself back in a toxic relationship with another alcoholic. Because my first husband was an alcoholic also. So that one didn't work out. Hey, hold on one second. Could you grab me a charging box? My phone's dying. The kids will have one.
What?
The kids, a charging box.
Charging box.
A box for the phone. The kids will let you borrow one. No, because I can't use that one. I'm using that one. I need a box.
Oh.
Please. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay.
So anyway, we had our son, and the relationship was insane. I mean, it was just terribly bad. And we ended up breaking up. And thank you. And so we had our son, and I ended up leaving her, and I took my son. She was also on the birth certificate, so she's his other mother. And let me plug that in. There we go. And then I moved in with someone else, got into another relationship right away, moved in with that person and another female. And she went for custody of our son, and we went through kind of a battle, and then we ended up getting 50-50. So now I had my 2 kids going 50-50 with my ex-husband, and then my son going 50-50 with my ex-wife, and and then me living with this other person. And then eventually what happened, this was kind of the whole thing that kind of started the end story of this, is I was driving the kids, the 2 older kids. Luckily my youngest son, whose name is Warren, was not with me, back to their dad's for his week. And I was trying to do the methadone program at this point. And I really wasn't serious about getting clean, but I think I was getting some pressure from other people. And so I was doing methadone, but I was still taking, I had introduced benzos at this point. Not only pain pills, but now I was introducing benzos. I had discovered Xanax and I loved it. So I was taking lots and lots of Xanax and Klonopins and different things, any kind of benzo I could get my hands on. And I was driving my kids, my 2 oldest ones, back to their dad's, and I was about a block away from his house, and I saw police lights behind my car. And I'm like, oh shit. And I knew, I was like, I'm fucked, because I knew I was in trouble. So I got pulled over, and they're like, what have you been drinking? And I'm like, no. And they're like, what have you been doing? And I'm like, nothing, you know. And they're like, you're under the influence of something, you're weeding all over the road. And I'm like, no, and I think I tried to tell them that we were checking out a school. It was Sunday. I don't even know what kind of story I was trying to tell. It was ridiculous, right? Some stupid story. My daughter is over here and she knows, she was there. And they said, you need to get out of the car, and right then I was like, oh my God, what have I done? And I had some pills in the car, in the center console, and they found them. And my heart just dropped. I was like, I have just screwed up my whole entire life. And so they arrested me in front of my 2 kids. And I remember seeing my kids in the back seat. It was really hot, and they wouldn't let my kids out of the car. And I motioned to my daughter, call grandma, because my mom was out of town. So I knew my ex-husband's grandma was nearby. So they called her, and she came and got the kids. I was so afraid, like, oh, they're going to pick, CPS is going to come, all the things that go through your head.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, and so that's last time I saw my kids for 3 years at that point.
And there are going to be people that say, well,
I deserved it.
You deserved it. Right.
Yes.
What they have to understand is there are mothers, and then there are people that should never be parents.
Mm-hmm.
Any mother who loves their children, even in active addiction. I want any children of addicts to hear this right now. Stop telling yourself the lie that you were never enough. You were always enough. Your parents were caught in the grip of addiction, and that is one of the hardest grips, one of the hardest demons. That's why some people don't make it out.
Yes.
Not because they're weak-minded or weak-willed or they love being like this, because let me tell you, we don't.
No.
We don't. But
and you don't even
will is so hard.
And sometimes, like, I don't even think, of course I see it now because I'm clean and sober and I'm a good mother today. But at the time, like, I didn't even realize what I was, to an extent, I didn't realize what I was doing. Like, I didn't even realize, and I'm not excusing it. It wasn't right. It was a terrible thing to put my children in danger. I could have killed myself and my children,
right,
or anybody else, other people's children on the road. That is absolutely, I couldn't have lived with myself. Like, if my children would have been killed, like, that's the worst thing. Anything happened to my children, that's it. There is no excuse for it. I'm not excusing it. I take full responsibility for what I did. Mm-hmm. But when you're in it, you don't even like realize, you don't even comprehend what you're really doing. because you're not even really thinking about it. You're just like, I need this to function. I need this to get through the day. And so you're not thinking about the consequences. You're not thinking about your actions. You're just not even thinking
Just
about
trying
it.
to not be in pain and not
Exactly.
with the pain of withdrawal. And it is selfish. It is,
Yes,
addiction
it is
is a
extremely
very
selfish.
selfish
It is.
thing.
It is. Yeah. So I went to jail for one night, and then I got out, and then I went back. I was living in an apartment, so I went back to my apartment, and I went back to get my kids the next week. I'm like, oh, I'm going back to get my kids. It's my week with them. And I got to the door, and my ex-husband answered, and he said, "You're not getting the kids." And I said, "What do you mean? It's my week." And he said, "You're never getting these children again." And I said, "You can't do that. They're my kids." And he said, "I don't care. You're not getting them." So I went home, and I had basically a mental breakdown, because I was like, my life without my kids isn't a life worth living. There's no point. It didn't even occur to me. And that, I think that goes to show like how messed up I really was. Like, it didn't occur to me to call like the sheriff and be like, it's my turn with my kids. Because legally, I still had the legal right to have my kids, even though I was in trouble. I wasn't like I had done anything where I had custody actually legally taken, or I hadn't served my, I had a court date and all these things set up, but I hadn't done any of that yet. I just like lost it. I just completely lost it. I lay down on my couch. I said, that's it. I'm done. Giving up. And so I laid on my couch for like, I don't know, 3 weeks. I basically stopped eating and drinking. I just went into this total like deep depression. And eventually a neighbor called, and 911, and the paramedics showed up, and I was hospitalized. They considered a suicide attempt. And my potassium was like dangerously low. I guess I was close to dying because my potassium was so low. I hadn't eaten or drinking in quite some time. So I was hospitalized. I was sent to like 2 hours away to a mental institution. And I was there for a couple weeks, and I was on a floor with a lot of other alcoholics and addicts who had attempted suicide. And I did groups, and I did different things. And of course, I was clean during this time, because they're not going to give you drugs in a mental institution except for psych meds and so on and so forth. And then they sent me back home with my psych meds, my little bag of psych meds, and what they put me on. And I went home, and I just continued to use. I was just like, well, this is my life now, and I don't have my kids, and this is it. So that went on for about 3 years. And I never saw the kids. I tried to get in touch with them. I left Easter baskets at the door. I left Christmas presents at the door. I tried to call. I never got through. No matter what I tried, he wouldn't let me even talk to him. And now I've talked to my daughter, because now I talk to her, and she lives with me now, and she came back, but she said they tried and they were not told anything about me. They were not told where I was. They didn't know if I was alive or dead. They didn't know what happened after that arrest.
That's traumatizing.
It was.
I mean, again, it's almost like it was just to, and don't get me wrong, again, he was absolutely, if it was for the right reasons, he was absolutely right.
Yes.
Absolutely right,
Yes.
But again, to not tell children anything about a mother that just disappears.
That was their primary caregiver up until that point.
Yeah, that's traumatizing. It's awful.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even speak of me. They didn't even, when they asked me, they were told not to ask.
Oh, wow.
My daughter said she held onto one of my earrings.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So 3 years went by. I was pretty deep in addiction. I had no job. I lost my job. My dad, or goes dad again. My dad ended up supporting me. He paid my bills. He enabled me to survive and be an addict. I mean, I love my dad, but that's basically what he did. And I just laid around, used drugs, didn't have much of a life, felt sorry for myself, wallowed in my own self-pity. And eventually he called me and said, I can't do this anymore. I mean, I can't afford it. My dad was going to get into his, be in his 80s. He had 2 heart attacks. And I said, well, what am I going to do? You know, it's all about me. What am I going to do? And, you know, and I said, well, yeah, what am I going to do? I'm going to be homeless if you don't help me, you know. And he said, well, at least can't afford that apartment anymore because I lived in a nice apartment. And so he said, you're going to have to find something cheaper. So I moved over to the worst part of town, to this little teeny crappy studio, and moved over to that. And then I got a call from my daughter. Oh, in the meantime, my youngest son that I'd had my ex-wife, I'd given her full custody. And because I knew I couldn't take care of him. I have always seen him though. My ex-wife, we have our issues, but I have to give to her that she has always let me see my son through good and through bad. And so I've always been in his life. She's been very consistent about letting me see him. I'm there every week, always have been there every week, still am to this day.
That's
so
wonderful. That's
yeah.
wonderful.
So even in my worst, when I was homeless, I was still there every Saturday. So, and she's always let me be there. And, you know, he's always calls me mommy. We're very close. So, you know, but I gave her full custody. I knew I couldn't take care of her. And she's a good mom. So, I got a call from my daughter. 3 years. She's 16 now. And she wants to see me. So we met up secretly at the mall. She doesn't tell her dad. And we meet up, and that was amazing. And I start getting, turns out she's going to high school, like basically a block from where I live. So she starts coming to my house at lunch secretly to see me. And we start talking. And then I find out that her life isn't going so well with her dad. She's come out of the closet, and her dad is very, very angry that she's gay, and has told her she's not. And of course, I'm sure it reminds him of me. And I'm sure, and my daughter is very much, yes, and my daughter is very much like me. We are very, very alike, and I'm sure that pisses him off to no end. She's contemplating suicide at 16, and he's not getting her help, and she's miserable, and she wants to come live with me. And I want to help her, but I know I'm really not in the position. But she calls me one day and says, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to kill myself. So I say, okay, I'll get you out. So I go with a friend, and we get her out of her dad's. She jumps out the window at midnight. I still have 50% custody. He never took away custody.
Okay.
So she jumps out the window at midnight at 16 of her dad's house, and I take her. And I call both. He was in another county, so I called the sheriffs at both county, the police departments, and say, I have my daughter. She's 16. I have 50% custody. She doesn't want to go back to her father's, you know, da da da. And they say, there's nothing he can do. She's 16. You have 50% custody. If she wants to go with you, that's fine. So my daughter comes back to live with me in this shithole, and so she comes back. I'm still using. She's with me 1 week. I finally have my daughter back, and I get arrested.
Oh God.
Yeah. And I get arrested because I never took care of the DUI situation. I ran from it. So I get arrested. I go to jail for a week. They don't really do much. I get out, and I get back, and we kind of live in this situation together, me and my daughter, just getting by. And that goes on for a while, and then eventually I can't pay bills. Eventually my dad gets sick. And I go over to see him one day, and I can tell he's dying. And he tells me he loves me. And then I get a call 2 weeks later from my sister that my dad has died. And everybody in the family got to say goodbye. But me. And my dog. They didn't call us. So I go over, and he's gone. And I help clean him up, because nobody cleaned him up. but also I know that I'm screwed because my dad's been taking care of me all this time.
Right, right. And they didn't call you, and there's a reason they didn't call you. This is not going to go well.
So my mom's like, I can't help you anymore, Aimee. And I'm like, I know, I knew this was coming, and I say, I know, Mom, I know. And she says, okay. And she said, well, Dad wanted you to have the Jeep. He had this old red Jeep. She goes, but I'm not going to give it to you. And I said, okay, that's okay. And then that was the last time I saw my family for quite a few years. And so I go home, and of course, within a few months, I get an eviction notice because I can't pay my rent. I can't pay my bills. I don't have anybody to pick up the pieces for me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get an eviction notice, and I have my daughter. I have nowhere to go. I can't pay the bills. I can't do anything. And so we have a friend of hers offers to let us come stay at their house. So we go stay with them for a while. And then I end up having to leave because I end up stealing some of their medication from their house.
Yep. Yep.
I'm an addict. I'm a piece of crap. That's what I do. I end up stealing pills from the people who gave me a place to stay.
Yep. Yep.
And so they, and thank God. And we have a really good relationship today. They're actually, my daughter ends up marrying that's my daughter-in-law now.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah. So, they let my daughter stay, thank God, because my daughter hadn't done anything wrong. So my daughter stays, and they take me back to the neighborhood I was living in with my suitcase and drop me off and say, sorry, which I deserved it. So I go to this friend's house, and I go there, and I'm like, I don't have a place to go. Can I stay here, crash for a few nights? So I'm homeless now, and I'm kind of just going wherever I could go. And that's when I started using heroin because I couldn't get pills anymore. They were just too expensive. And I'd gone to a friend, and I said, I need to get pills. And they said, we can't get you pills, but we can get you heroin. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. No. And then eventually I got sick, and I'm like, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And so
to avoid the withdrawal.
Yes, exactly. So I do it, and I'm like, well, what have I been wasting my time on these pills all this time for? So I end up doing that, and that was the big downfall. Not that I already wasn't homeless and in a downfall, but I mean, that was just like more of even of a crash. I mean, it was just, I started using IV heroin, and I'm just hanging around with the worst kind of people. I'm doing anything to support my habit. I'm sleeping on bus benches. I am hanging out with terrible people. I'm doing exotic dancing to make money. Anything. Just a total nightmare. And so one night I'm crashing in a trap house, and bang, bang on the door the next morning, and it's the police. And they have a warrant for someone in the house. And of course they run everyone's name in the house. And I still have a warrant out from that DUI.
Oh, wow.
With the kids from that many years ago. And I get arrested. And looking back on it, that was the best day, one of the best days of my life. I would never think I would say that.
Right.
But I get arrested, and I go to jail. And of course I'm sick as a dog because I'm detoxing in jail, because I had a real hefty habit at that point.
Yeah, and they do not care.
What?
They
do not care. Not even an Imodium. I couldn't even get an Imodium from those people. I was like, are you kidding me? A Gatorade, anything? Gotta get something. No.
Right. Nope.
Mm-mm. So I'm detoxing in jail, and I'm looking around, and at this point I'm 42 years old. So that means I've been doing this for over 20 years, almost. And I'm looking around at these young girls in jail, and I'm going, I just had I hate to say a moment of clarity because I hate that term, but it really was. It was just like, what the hell are you doing? Like, really, where has your life, who are you anymore? It was just really who have you become? I didn't even recognize myself anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what happens. We lose
Yeah. And I think
ourselves. In the end,
Yeah.
the last thing we lose is ourselves.
Yeah. And I didn't even know who I was. I hated myself. I absolutely hated myself. I had so much shame and self-hatred. Everything that had happened with the kids, it just sent me further into, you know, my addiction and further into just shame. And I had so much guilt. I just could not get out of it. And then I think finally sobering up in jail, you know, I had to look at myself. I had to. And I had to finally, I wasn't high, you know, for the first time in so long. It was like forcing me to look at myself. And I was like, shit, you gotta either get your shit together or you just get it over with and die. Like, this is just ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
Right.
And so I did 90 days in jail. I spent my birthday, Christmas, and New Year's in jail that year. I turned 43 in jail. And no, I'm sorry, 42 in jail. And I got out with the clothes on my back. And probation. And they gave me, I had to do mandatory 3 nights NA meetings, 3 a week. And I was in this town, I didn't know anybody. I decided not to go back to the town that I was using in, because I'm like, go back there, that's going to be a problem. So I got out, I called a girl I'd done some time with in jail and said, can I stay with you for a few days? I have nowhere to go. Luckily, they let me stay with them. And I started going to NA. And I was just determined not to go back. Like, I don't know. I just said, I just cannot do this anymore. I'm fucking exhausted. And I just hate myself. I want to not hate myself anymore. And I met my fiance, who now is my fiance, but I met another person there who had a few years, and we started talking. And he's a recovering meth addict. And you know, I ended up eventually moving into with him, and he was like, you need a place to stay, and it was out in the middle of nowhere on a rice farm and away from everything. And he really gave me time to kind of just focus on my sobriety the first year and just really work on myself. And I went on Suboxone, even though I did 3 months without it. When I first got clean, I started feeling some cravings, and I started I had a lot of depression and a lot of post-acute withdrawal. And so I got a hold of a doctor that I knew was an addiction specialist, and I went on Suboxone and started doing therapy. And now, you know, I've been clean for 3 years. It'll be 3 years, 3 months, God willing, on the 2nd of March.
That's
and,
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And I have my daughter in my life. She lives here with her wife, who was that family.
Nice. Now tell us about the little surprises that showed up.
Yes, and
bonus.
so 1 year into my sobriety, you know, I'm 43 years old, and I'm thinking, you know, here's my life. I'm gonna live a nice carefree life with this new fiance. We're gonna go travel and do all these things. And my period was late, and I was like, that's strange. And I even asked my doctor, do you think I can get pregnant? He said, oh, no, there's no way, your age and everything else. A positive pregnancy test, and then went to the ultrasound, and I was pregnant with twins.
Of course you were.
Yeah.
We don't do anything small.
No. So I had healthy, identical twin boys on September 14th, 2019. So I now have 18-month-old twin boys.
It's like,
so I get to do this over again, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
tell them where they can find you on TikTok, because let me tell you, Aimee's had these little boys in a couple of videos. They are adorable.
Thank you. Thank
What's
you.
your name
They're
on TikTok?
amazing.
I think I have it up there right, but I'm not sure.
It's at Twin Mommy to Be, but it's a 2.
And
at
a little
Twin
B.
Mommy to Be. Yeah.
A small B. Okay, so I think I did do it right.
You did.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Now, there is one kind of sad part to your story as far as your son.
Yes.
Not
So,
your son from your first marriage, I should say.
So my oldest son, who was the other child in the car, the sibling of my daughter. I have not seen him since that day of the DUI. No, it's okay. Since that day of the DUI, he stayed with his dad. And I have tried everything. Eventually even going back to court the year after I got sober, and just have not been able to make contact. Unfortunately, my ex-husband has found ways to stop that. He had an attorney, and I did write a letter, and they said he got the letter and that he ripped it up and didn't want to see it. But then I've heard from family members who speak to him that he doesn't even know that I've tried. He thinks I haven't even tried.
Right.
He did move him to another state. So, it's hard. I'm hoping he'll be 18 this year, in March, actually. But unfortunately, he has another year in his dad's house because he started kindergarten a year late. He's a late bloomer. So while he's under his dad's roof, I don't think I'll be able to reach out until he's not with his dad anymore. I just don't want to put him in a bad position.
Right.
So,
we'll definitely keep you in our thoughts.
Thank you. I appreciate
that. And, hopefully that will resolve itself at some point. But for now, you've got, 4 children.
Yes.
2, one of which you got back. Hooray.
Yes.
And then it's almost like you have a complete second chance.
Yes, it is. It's great. It's amazing. I don't know. I never ever thought that I'd get to parent again, at least, like this. I mean, and I certainly wasn't expecting it. And I get a lot of crap on TikTok for that sometimes. Because people are like, I get some negative comments like, oh, what about your older children? Aren't they resentful of the younger children? And my daughter's done some videos responding to things like that. We don't feel that way, so it's just the way things happened. And we're a big, crazy, dysfunctional family, but it is what it is. We love each other. So I'm happy I get to do it again.
That's awesome. That's
yeah.
Awesome. Aimee, thanks so much for
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
This was awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, no problem. And looking forward to those 3 years, that celebration coming up.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm excited.
Well, that's going to do it. That's going to do it for us for this episode of The Recovery Scene. Make sure you like and subscribe and share Aimee's story with other people, and we will see you